the World Federation of Occupational Therapists. And it's a real pleasure to welcome you all to this virtual side event at the 2025 High Level Political Forum. This side event is organised by Handicap International, Humanity Inclusion, in collaboration with the UNDESA Social Inclusion and Participation Branch, the World Rehabilitation Alliance, the International Cerebral Palsy Society, and the World Health Organization. And it's a really important topic that we come together to talk about, the missing health link for 1/3 of the world's population, and how we discuss better access to rehabilitation services. So thank you for joining us today. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of housekeeping from me to start with. The webinar is being recorded. I invite you to keep your cameras off and your microphones off to enable better participation for everyone. The webinar is in English, however, French interpretation is available. To access this, please click on More and then the interpretation icon. There are closed captions in French and English that can be viewed on the streaming platform via the hyperlink that is provided in the chat. We will have time for questions and answers at the end. Participants are invited to type any questions or comments in the chat box, and hopefully we'll have a chance to answer those either as we go along in the meeting or towards the end. If your question, however, is quite complex or it looks like we're running out of time, please feel free to add your email address and we can get back to you at a later time. Thank you. So why are we here? So in this month, global leaders are gathering to review the global progress on the implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 3. And that is particularly linked to health. And we're here because we recognise that health is not just about surviving disease. It's about functioning, participating, and having a quality of life. Rehabilitation is an essential health service. Rehabilitation helps people to recover, but also to maintain their independence, but also, most importantly, to be able to participate fully in their communities and society. We recognise that rehabilitation is a core part of universal health coverage. Rehabilitation is not a luxury or a specialised service. It should be accessible to all. With only 5 years left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, it's urgent to prioritise rehabilitation and where it fits within universal health coverage plans, where rehabilitation fits in national budgets, and how we look at global health monitoring. Next slide. So what are the things that we need to be addressing? We need to be aware that only 1 in 3 people worldwide, that 1 in 3 people worldwide could benefit from rehabilitation. Yet only 50% of those people are able to receive the services that they need or require in a timely manner. Groups most affected include people living with non-communicable diseases, mental health conditions, disabilities, injuries, or the impacts of conflict. And we have an ageing population globally. Without rehabilitation, people face avoidable disability, mental distress, poverty, and social inclusion. Access to rehabilitation is an investment, not just in the individual, but their families, communities, and populations. It's about stability, workforce participation, resilience, and inclusive communities. There are many global commitments to supporting our agenda, dating right back to 1946 and the WHO Constitution that said health is not just the absence of disease, it's a complete physical, mental, and social well-being. These are foundations for services to support functioning and well-being. And throughout the years, we've seen many other agendas highlighting this need. And particularly in 2023, when we saw the WHO resolution on rehabilitation at the World Health Assembly, which called on countries to integrate rehabilitation into health systems, investing in workforce and data, and ensuring access to all. Which really brings us back to our key theme of today's webinar about achieving SDG 3 and the requirement of rehabilitation to be recognised across all targets, including maternal and child health, NCDs, mental health, injuries, reproductive health, and emergencies. So what will today's session do? We've got 4 excellent speakers that I know will really get us thinking about this topic. We need to explore how rehabilitation is essential in achieving SDG 3 and how it supports the other SDGs, including quality education, decent work, reduced inequalities, and inclusive communities. We need to explore why functioning matters across the life course, right from childhood through to older age, and what perspectives and examples and lived experiences can help us to understand this urgent need to improve access to rehabilitation and ensure no one is left behind. We have a shared goal to move beyond survival and build health systems that promote dignity, resilience, and well-being for all. So with that, I would like to move on to our first panelist, Valentina Pomato, who is the Inclusive Development Advocacy Manager at Humanity and Inclusion. And Valentina is going to spotlight on a new report for us. Thank you, Valentina.
Thank you very much, Samantha, for this introduction. And I think that what I'm going to present will resonate a lot with your introductory word. I'm very pleased to share some key messages and recommendations from our new report produced by Humanity and Inclusion and entitled Rehabilitation for All, Essential Throughout Life and for Many Health Conditions. You will find a QR code on these slides for those who are interested to download the report, and I'm also putting the link in the chat for the download. This report highlights that rehabilitation is a life-changing health strategy across all age groups and health conditions, illustrates persistent gaps as well as successful strategies for strengthening rehabilitation and assistive technology, and builds on case studies, testimonies, and key informants interviews from Benin, Haiti, and Uganda. Next slide, please. Yes, we can go to the next slide. Rehabilitation is a vital part of achieving universal health coverage. Yeah, you can move on with putting the paragraphs on the slide. Thank you. So it's a vital part of UHC, universal health coverage, yet it remains underfunded in many countries, especially low and middle income countries. Public health budgets often deprioritize rehabilitation within health spending that in countries like Benin, Uganda, and Haiti already falls short of international commitments. High out-of-pocket expenses are common, making rehabilitation services inaccessible for many, especially women, persons with disabilities, and those in rural areas, often resulting in catastrophic health expenditures. In Haiti, for example, out-of-pocket spending represents 48% of all health expenditure, and in Benin, social protection covers only 8.4% of the population. Fragmented and poorly coordinated financing creates inefficiencies and service gaps. To improve access and equity, rehabilitation needs to be prioritized in public budgets with stronger coordination across government and external funding sources. Indeed, rehabilitation heavily relies on external aid. In Uganda, 27% of assistive products are provided by NGOs. In Haiti, 28% of rehabilitation centers are NGO-run, and all centers rely on external aid. So in a context marked by significant cuts in global development aid, we can see that the fragile rehabilitation systems are further threatened. We can go to the next one. The report also bridges the gap in emergency response. It really wants to highlight that rehabilitation needs surge during emergencies due to increased injuries, trauma, and loss of assistive devices, especially in countries already struggling with limited services. Yet, access becomes even more difficult as health infrastructures are damaged and professionals are displaced. Despite its importance, rehabilitation is often excluded from emergency preparedness and response plans, seen as a post-crisis need rather than a clear, critical early intervention. This delay undermines patient recovery and system efficiency. In this graphic that is also part of the report, you can see the number of people with rehabilitation needs throughout their lives in millions per health condition group. And this graphic clearly shows that the higher number of people with rehabilitation needs is in the age group between 50 and 75 years old. As global population age, particularly in low and middle income countries, the need for rehabilitation is rapidly increasing. By 2030, 1 in 6 people will be aged 60 or older, and aging often brings physical and cognitive decline, along with comorbidities, making rehabilitation essential for maintaining functioning and independence. The UN Decade of Healthy Aging calls for stronger investment in integrated, age-inclusive rehabilitation services. We can go to the next slide. So if we look at what health conditions can benefit from rehabilitation, we need first of all to understand that rehabilitation is often misunderstood as a service only for persons with disabilities. In reality, it is essential for anyone experiencing temporary or long-term limitations in physical, mental, or social functioning due to injuries, chronic or acute diseases, aging, or trauma. It also plays a role in prevention for those at risk of impairment. And in rehabilitation, we can see various services such as assessment, therapy, exercises, assistive technology, and environmental modifications to promote independence and well-being. Next slide, please. In the report, we highlighted 3 testimonies showing how rehabilitation is essential throughout the life course. We have the testimony from Temia, who is a 32-year-old single mother living in a refugee settlement in Uganda, who cares for 2 children with disabilities. Temia participated in the Humanity and Inclusion project called CHANCE, and through it, she gained access to physiotherapy for one of her child and to occupational therapy for the other child, plus caregiver support via cognitive behavior therapy groups, boosting her emotional resilience. Indeed, parents and caregivers play a vital role in supporting their children's rehabilitation. Children and adolescents are key users of rehabilitation because although child mortality rates have decreased globally, the number of young people with conditions requiring rehabilitation has increased. We can go to the next slide. Another testimony comes from Haiti, where Yezulen, a 41-year-old woman, suffered a stroke that caused paralysis on her right side, severely impacting her mobility and daily functioning. Previously, she was the primary breadwinner working as a market vendor, but her condition has placed financial strain on her family. Despite her challenges, Yezulen is determined to regain her independence, return to her church and work life, and care for her children. Next slide, please. And our third testimony is from Suleiman, a 60-year-old road crash survivor from Cotonou, Benin, who experienced major mobility challenges that affected his daily life and work. He waited over 6 months for a prosthetic leg due to rehabilitation service delays, and he shared with us, having a leg prosthesis is a luxury in Benin, while many poor people need one. The full cost coverage was essential as he could not have afforded the services otherwise. Being these, we can go to the next slide, please. And last one for me. This report is an advocacy report. So of course, it comes with a set of recommendations. And here I'm presenting a few ones that are of particular importance. We recommend health decision makers to ensure a sufficient ring-fence funding for rehabilitation and assistive technology at all levels of the health systems and in emergency preparedness and response, to expand health coverage and social protection benefits in order to reduce out-of-pocket health expenditures, systematically use disaggregated data, at least by gender, age, and disability, and rehabilitation indicators, strengthen and expand the rehabilitation workforce, and promote interdisciplinary approaches. Interdisciplinary teams, including, for example, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, nurses, medical specialists, are essential to providing coordinated, tailored care across age groups and health conditions. And we also invite to apply an intersectional lens to ensure that rehabilitation services and assistive technology meet gender, disability, and life cycle requirements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Valentina. Thank you for highlighting this really important report. I think some of the figures that you shared with us really help us to see this real need for the focus on rehabilitation and the urgency for a coordinated multi-stakeholder sort of like action around this. So thank you very much. Thank you to everybody that's joining us. If you do have questions for Valentina or for any of our next panelists, please put your questions into the chat and we'll have time at the end. So thank you again, Valentina. And with that, we'll move on to our next panelist, who is Vincent Thion, who is the strategic leadership expert at Enable, who is a Belgian agency for international cooperation. Welcome, Vincent, and you're going to talk about partnerships for rehabilitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Samantha, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. We can go to the next slide straight. I'm going to talk on behalf of the Belgian Agency for International Cooperation and to look at what does it mean to be international partners and how, as international partners, we can help build a stronger response to the need for rehabilitation. Next one. So quickly here, for Belgium, what is important is to look at global challenges, social and economic empowerment, climate change and environment, peace, security, and demographic transition. We have quite a number of projects, next one, in 20 countries, and most of them are in fragile context. You see that it's mainly now in Africa, West Africa, Great Lakes region, Middle East, and also in Ukraine. Now, we look at mainly 4 components as our DNA for the cooperation we have with the countries. We really want a very strong partnership. It means that we co-create together with the partners how we can assist them in reaching their ambitions. That requires some proximity and provision of expertise. And that's how we would like to help really, and how we see the philosophy of working in development cooperation. Next one. Why do we engage as an international organization in rehabilitation? I think there are mainly 4 reasons. We've seen and we've heard from the previous speakers of the global need. 1 in 3 people who might be in need at some point, and only few of them, half of them receiving the care and the attention. We see this rehabilitation also as an essential component of universal health coverage. It's a core service. It will improve functioning and productivity of people, quality of life, and it's an imperative for equity and right base. We really want that rehabilitation be seen as a part of the care services so that it really responds to the need for people in a very comprehensive way. Next one. I want just to elaborate a little bit on some of the principles that are very important for Belgium when we talk of partnership. We really put the country where we partner at the center. we don't come from Belgium with solutions to problems, with ready-made interventions, but it's really to say, what are the priorities for the countries? And how can we, as partners, align with the national strategies, policies, and priorities? It might mean sometimes discussion and exchanges and conversations about the strategies and where we can assist or where we can help in strengthening them. But it's really this partnership alignment for a system, a health system, to be stronger. We don't want to work in parallel to the system. We don't want to work on the side to respond to a need. It might be needed, and I'm not saying this is wrong. There might be crises and urgencies that require a sudden and immediate response that might not always be fully aligned. But we really want to look at a long-term support for the ministries, Ministry of Health or Social Affairs and the ministries involved, so that there is a long-term effect for the benefit of the population. That means we look at results, we look at being accountable both sides, learning from each other, exchanging knowledge, having technology transfer, expertise transfer, skills transfer as much as possible. And we are aware that we don't work in isolation. So the question of harmonizing the different partners, the different institutions, being local NGO, international bilateral or multilateral actors, it's really important to work towards a strong coordination for efficiency, to avoid duplication, and to put our hands together towards the same goal. That includes also inclusiveness and participation. Ministries, institutions, international organizations cannot really work without including the patient, the family, the people, the community, the civil society, so that everyone can put hands towards the goal. It includes, as I mentioned earlier, equity and human rights in a spirit of solidarity, shared responsibility, and long-term commitment. Next one. I will just say a few words to the experience we have started in Ukraine. In Ukraine, as you know, the need is high because of the war and because of the crisis there. And we've tried to mobilize some funding, some expertise, and some support to see how can we contribute to the reconstruction and the recovery of number of people and families who've been so much affected by the conditions. So I give here a few questions or a few entry points. Who are we working with? It's definitely with the leadership and the coordination of the Ministry of Health, because that's the ministry that has the mandate to oversee rehabilitation services in the country, in association with different ministries, social policy, veterans affairs, education, with the National Health Service for Ukraine, which is like the social protection and the health insurance system in Ukraine, as well as a lot of international partners. You've seen in the slide, we really want to put the patient in the center, the patient and his or her family, so that we all work towards the same goal, his or her welfare and well-being. What do we do? As I mentioned, it's patient-centered health service to work with the ministry and the different level of care, being hospital, health center, or local site, to say, how can we put the patient in the center, make sure that he or she has access to quality services, that where he goes into the service, he meets people who have skills and expertise in a broad area of disciplines, and we can eventually pilot some innovation. Next one. These are a few examples of what we do in terms of hospital renovation. You can click on the next equipment, psychosocial support, social welfare, nursing, wound care, speech therapy, occupational health. We really try to see through different angles how we can assist the health system and strengthen the health system towards the care of the patient. Next one. I think next, yeah. A few spots maybe. As you might imagine, in Ukraine, there's been a lot of destruction of infrastructure. So one component of the program includes renovation, reconstruction, or modernization, because some of the structure were quite old. So this is an ongoing process. Next one. We understand also that while walls can require to be renovated, it's also about the expertise and building up human capital, either through the initiative of the Ministry of Health to build up centers of excellence where they have specific skills towards rehabilitation that are being revised, reviewed. This includes curriculum upgrade, curriculum development, looking at new teaching methodologies, doing a lot of practice and hands-on training. And where we support mainly is on different areas that include speech therapy, wound and burns care, prosthesis and orthotics, assistive therapy, cardiomaxillofacial surgery, occupational health, and nursing care. Those are the priorities where the ministry asks for support. And the support has been in terms of what I said, curriculum adjustment or teaching support, mentoring between teachers and exchange visits of teachers, and looking at how to make hands-on training practical and patient-centered. Next. We try to pilot some innovations as well, either in the area of craniomaxillofacial reconstruction, looking at 3D prostheses, looking at very high technology, but not distracting from the whole services. So the idea with this innovation is to say, how can we help the health system to identify the patient who need this type of advanced care, and to have a sort of a pathway of referrals so that the patient first care is well taken care of, and the ones who require this sophisticated support would get it at the end of the pyramid. It might also be support for better physiotherapy, looking at tools and digital tools to help adjusting assistive technologies and to help fine-tuning better physiotherapy care. Next one. The take-home messages that are important from our perspective is really that, as others have said, rehabilitation is a core health service. It has to be aligned to the leadership in the country and build the system. We really want to emphasize that it will be much more profitable and useful and relevant for the patient and the family, that the system is there to last, of high quality and of a patient-centered approach. We insist also on multidiscipline and comprehensive approach. There's not one solution that can fit all. There's no one system that is better than all, and we have all to contribute, from medical, entry point, nursing, psychological, physiotherapy, speech, occupation, social, logistical, I would say political as well, because the political level, even at local level and local community, is important for the access to be perfect. Next one.
Thank you, Vincent. Just in the interest of time, could I just
Sure.
ask that we perhaps leave it there, because I think you've raised some really important points, and it resonates very much with about that importance of partnerships. I think you've highlighted, you know, that there really needs to be some shared responsibility there. And I loved the points that you made about that co-creation being essential in those partnership agreements. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Again, to people that are joining us, please put your questions into the chat for any of our panelists. But thank you, Vincent. That was really poignant. And our next panelist is Nonya Nawike, who is the chair of the International Cerebral Palsy Executive Board. and founder and executive director of the Cerebral Palsy Centre in Nigeria. Welcome, Nonye, and thank you for addressing the barriers to rehabilitation.
Yeah, it's a good afternoon for me here. Let me quickly add that I am a mother to a 19-year-old who has cerebral palsy and who is severely disabled. So you can understand my leaning towards rehabilitation. She's actually my certificate for sitting here this afternoon. It is an honor to speak with you about the right to rehabilitation across life course, addressing barriers to equity and inclusion. Next slide, please. We all hope that when illness strikes or disability becomes a part of our lives, we won't simply be left to cope. Our hope is that we have to be supported to live fully, to preserve our dignity, and to remain as independent and active for as long as possible. That is the promise of rehabilitation. And it is just as it's vital at the end of life, it is the same at the beginning of life. Slide 3, please. Why does rehabilitation matter? Today, I want to share why early and continuous rehabilitation, which is tailored to gender, abilities, and needs at every stage of life, is more than a medical intervention. It is a human right, and it is a cornerstone of palliative care, as well as an investment in the health and dignity and resilience of the entire communities. Next slide, please. Let me introduce you to Fine. So Tokwe is a single mom who came to us here in March this year. She arrived with her 4-year-old daughter, Nifemi, who has cerebral palsy. She traveled a long distance because close to her, there were no services, and she didn't even know where to turn to. Her husband and family have abandoned her because they said they don't have history of such a child in their family. With nowhere to turn to, she was desperate. And she was sleeping on the markets with her child. You can see her in the open market. That's with her everything of her life. That's where she sleeps in the market. But her story is not unique. Across the world, and especially in low and middle income countries, rehabilitation remains out of reach for far too many. Yet, when rehabilitation is accessible, it transforms life. Children can go to school, adults can find and keep jobs, and everyone can participate in a society with dignity. Next slide. When we talk of rehabilitation, we have story, lives will be changed. So let me share some stories of change with you. When I think of that, what comes to my mind first is Amino. This young lady, or young girl she was when she came to us, was hidden at home. We were not taking her anywhere. But by the time she came to us and we started, the process of rehabilitation, you can see that she now transformed. She started attending school. We were able to put her in a mainstream school, and she could play and read and interact with her classmates. Her family became proud to take her out. Next slide, please. The next story is that of testimony, a young boy with cerebral palsy who came to us severely malnourished, constantly having seizures, hardly aware of his environment. But with ongoing rehabilitation, he is thriving. His health and quality of life have improved, and he is a much happier child. Even my 91-year-old mother reminds me every day why rehabilitation matters. The right kind of support keeps her mobile and preserves her dignity. Rehabilitation is not a one-time event. It must start early and evolve with the person's needs at every stage of life. Next slide. There are so many barriers that come with, that we face when we talk of rehabilitation. There is distance. Sadly, the benefits of rehabilitation still don't reach everyone who needs them because of these barriers. We see distance. Oftentimes, services are placed in the cities, often in big hospitals where they are far removed from the rural communities. Then there is the cost. Too many families simply cannot afford care, which is why CP Center provides free services. But then there's a limit to how many people it can manage. Again, there is the issue of stigma. Some families are too ashamed to bring their children to therapy centers. And there's the poor continuity of care. Many stop treatments because either they stop it too soon, either because cost, and then unrealistic expectations of care. It is often the poorest and the least educated who are most marginalized and who suffer most. When we talk of benefits of rehabilitation, you can still remember there are so many benefits that come with rehabilitation. We need to act because investing in rehabilitation benefits everyone. Children can go to school or in places where schools are not accessible. They can learn in rehabilitation centers. The families will feel less burdened with some respite and support. If you remember the first picture of this young lady I shared, now you can see how within 4 months, her life has been transformed and her child is in it. Both her and her child are much better. The communities will become more inclusive. These are some benefits of rehabilitation, and people can live, work, and participate with dignity. This is the power of rehabilitation. So what needs to change? To get the benefits of rehabilitation, we need policies and systems that make rehabilitation a priority. We must include rehabilitation in national health and educational plans. We need to integrate rehabilitation into primary health care closer to communities. Funding of community-based organizations needs to be put into the priority list. Oftentimes, we invest so much on research, which is beautiful. It's good. Research is good because without research, we probably will not go forward. We cannot know what will happen in the next generation. But we do know that oftentimes research actually benefits people yet to be born. So how about we consciously spare some good funding for people who need rehabilitation, equip rehabilitation places? There is need to educate the public to combat stigma and promote inclusion. Rehabilitation is not a luxury. It is a right. It is smart policy. When we invest in rehabilitation, we invest in the health, education, and productivity of our entire society. I'll reiterate that rehabilitation is not a luxury, it is a right. When we invest in it, we invest in everyone's future. Let us ensure that no one, like Tokme or her daughter, is left simply to cope. Let us support everyone at every stage of life to live fully with dignity, inclusion, and hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Nonye. There were some really poignant points in there. I think the sharing of those stories were very powerful for all of us listening. So thank you for that. A lot resonating with me personally, but also as an occupational therapist about that meaningful lives for everybody. So thank you. And a reminder to everybody to please put your questions into the chat and also add your email address just in case we don't get around to answering them at the end, although I hope we will. And to our final panelist, Masumi Onu, the Chief of Social Inclusion and Participation Branch in the United Nations Department for Economic and Social Affairs. We're pleased to have you with us, Masumi, and I look forward to your presentation on the rehabilitation as a lever for inclusion.
Thank you, Samantha. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Let me first of all extend my warm welcome to all of you in this event. I will present the work that UNDESA has been carrying out for the Disability and Development Report and the report's findings on rehabilitation. UNDESA promotes the achievement of the SDGs for all, including persons with disabilities, and in line with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The convention was adopted in 2006. Its Articles 25 and 26 focus on health and rehabilitation. They call for state parties to take all appropriate measures to ensure access for persons with disabilities to health-related rehabilitation, and for states parties to organize, strengthen, and extend comprehensive habilitation and rehabilitation services and programs, particularly in the areas of health, employment, education, and social services. Next slide, please. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was adopted in 2015. The agenda makes no direct reference to rehabilitation, but Target 3.8 calls for universal health coverage. Universal health coverage means all people have access to the full range of rehabilitation services they need. Moreover, persons with disabilities are being left behind in all goals. Lack of access to rehabilitation services is a main barrier to inclusion, and improving access to these services is crucial to achieve the goals. Next slide, please. To respond to the request by the UN General Assembly for a flagship report about progress towards the implementation of the CRPD and the realization of the SDGs for persons with disabilities, UNDESA produced 2 reports on disability and development, one in 2018 and another recently in 2024. Next slide, please. These reports are a result of a collective effort of more than 200 experts worldwide. For the 2024 report, 62% of the experts were from UN entities and other intergovernmental organizations, 13% from NGOs, especially representative organizations of persons with disabilities, and the remaining 25% were from other backgrounds such as government agencies, research institutes, etc. Next slide, please. The 2024 report is the second and now largest global compilation and analysis based on data, legislation, and policies from over 100 countries to understand the socioeconomic circumstances of persons with disabilities, the barriers they face in their daily lives, and the impact of the COVID-19 crisis and the progress for each SDG for persons with disabilities. Next slide, please. The report analyzed 118 indicators related to 63 SDG targets. Some of these indicators are SDG indicators, others are proxy of SDG indicators when data is lacking. Others are indicators that can contextualize the SDGs for persons with disabilities, for example, accessibility, unmet needs for assistive technology. The report also used crowdsourced data collected through smartphone applications to assess the accessibility of physical spaces like schools, museums, health centers worldwide. Next slide, please. These reports found that the situation of persons with disabilities has improved since the adoption of the Convention 19 years ago. Remarkable progress has been made in the adoption of laws guaranteeing the rights of persons with disabilities and in the expansion of accessible environments that can be enjoyed by persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others. But despite this progress, persons with disabilities remain left behind in all 17 SDGs. The Disability and Development Report 2024 analyzed 63 SDG targets relevant for persons with disabilities. For half of these targets, there is not enough data to assess progress. For the other half, there is enough data to assess progress and the trends are bleak. Only 6% of the targets have indicators on track. For 30%, the progress is insufficient, and for 14%, the situation has stalled or deteriorated. Gaps between persons with and without disabilities reach 20 percentage points for poverty and employment. Next slide, please. What are the findings of the UN Disability and Development Report regarding rehabilitation? The report found that rehabilitation services like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and hearing therapy are not always available for persons with disabilities who need them. Data available for 9 countries indicate that on average, 64% of persons with disabilities who needed rehabilitation services could not get them, from 28% in South Africa to 82% in Nepal. Next slide, please. Barriers to access rehabilitation include lack of financial resources. Persons with disabilities earn lower wages, face additional costs related to their disability, and are at higher risk of poverty. Lack of accessible transport to rehabilitation services. 43% of persons with disabilities indicate that transportation is not accessible to them, and unavailability of adequate rehabilitation services in the communities where persons with disabilities live. Next slide, please. Moreover, social welfare services at times fail to provide coverage for rehabilitation, or the coverage is only provided if the person is employed or if the family pays the premium. Sometimes the services are only available to persons who have been legally recognized as having a disability, preventing the universal availability of rehabilitation for all who need them. Next slide, please. This lack of access to rehabilitation services remain a barrier to inclusion, and improving access to rehabilitation is essential to achieve Goal 3. And because I'm out of time, I think I will skip, if I may, to the second last slide, 17. Yes, thank you. So to wrap up, rehabilitation can empower persons with disabilities and bring us back on track to achieve the SDGs, including SDG 3. But today, in our societies, persons with disabilities still face many barriers accessing rehabilitation services. To ensure equitable access to rehabilitation, countries need to offer health insurance coverage for rehabilitation services and implement disability-specific social protection schemes that effectively address the cost of rehabilitation. Persons with disabilities and their representative organizations should be involved in the design of these programs because they can offer their direct perspectives. Countries also need to implement social protection schemes, including floors, to ensure adequate income security for persons with disabilities. Without this security, persons with disabilities cannot afford essential services and rehabilitation. And we need to support developing countries, and especially least developed countries, through international cooperation activities promoting access to rehabilitation. In particular, we need to build capacity in countries with fewer resources so that they too can offer adequate rehabilitation services for all persons with disabilities who need them. UNDESA stands ready to support member states and their partners in implementing rehabilitation services and realizing the SDGs by, for, and with persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Suri. I think some really interesting points there, and thank you for highlighting certainly some of those statistics and linking us back to the SDGs. I think, a lot of those statistics around persons with disabilities are quite startling. And it also reminds us of the presentations by all of our panelists that while persons with disabilities are recipients and participatory in rehabilitation, is that rehabilitation is also beyond those with disabilities and there for all of us, but any actions that we take are about the inclusion for everyone. So thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for all the points that you've raised. Thank you for keeping on time, which does allow us a little bit of time for some questions, and I will go forward with some that have appeared. We've had some questions around research and funding for rehabilitation, especially in lifelong conditions. And I'm going to put this to our panelists, and maybe each one of you might have just one short sentence to think about. How can research and innovation in rehabilitation be better supported and financed, especially in lifelong conditions such as cerebral palsy? But how do we also raise the attention for this need and secure funding for new initiatives? We know that funding for research and rehabilitation is often quite limited. So I put it to all four panelists about any ideas about how we can support research and innovation in rehabilitation to be better financed. Valentina, do you want to maybe start us off?
Yes, thank you. Maybe what I want to share here is that we need to raise the attention for research in the field of rehabilitation, but for rehabilitation at large. And I'm prone to say that probably what we need to do and continue doing is to make sure that the narrative around health shifts from a focus on morbidity and mortality only to a focus that embraces mortality, morbidity, and functioning as the three health indicators that go hand in hand. And this is a work that requires a lot of advocacy, building political will, and yes, building also on the results that we have achieved so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nanya, do you maybe have something to add about that, thinking especially with your knowledge around cerebral palsy and how we encourage more research into rehabilitation?
Yes, when you mentioned that, I smiled because when it comes to cerebral palsy, rehabilitation, you see children who didn't have any, have not achieved any milestone. So you are trying to bring them to do that. You know what I mean? So we are talking of habilitation. But what happens is that research and innovations, oftentimes they are geared towards ableism. So they don't think of conditions which in reality, the person is never going to get out of it. So it's not encouraging to them. So that is why I'm saying that they have to understand that some conditions are just the way, they are, like cerebral palsy. Some of the children, all you are doing is to ensure that their quality of life is improved, less distortions, less contractions. So the funding, the innovations they have to come up with, how do you really help the caregivers? Apart from the child, what are we going to do to improve the life of these children as well as the caregiver? Because as the children are getting older, personal experience, I've been working with them for the past 15 years. My daughter is 19. As they're getting older, it becomes more difficult to manage them. So what are you inventing for us, to be able to have a better, to be able to give them better care? And more funding should be put in it. You are not just looking at the individual who you need to rehabilitate. You are looking at those who are, helping them along the line. So we shall have to kind of shift our focus towards making sure that, rehabilitation is like, he's going to get well, maybe somebody has an injury, you goes into rehabilitation, the physiotherapist works with them, and he gets well. But this is a situation where the child is never going to get well. He might just, depending on the level of affectation anyway, the person might get a little bit better, but in the true sense, as the child is getting older, it's becoming more difficult, complications are setting in, other comorbidity factors are coming up. So what are we inventing to support them as they go through life?
Thank you. Again, some really important points. I think the issue around research is something that we really need to be thinking about, and certainly advocacy. And I know it's something in the World Rehabilitation Alliance that, there is a big focus on how we look at this research agenda and how we look at for major research institutions and how we look for more funding around that. So thank you for that. I'm going to move to another question because I'm aware that we lose translation on the hour. So I'll let Masumi and Vincent answer our next question. For people listening, if you do have questions, put your email address by your question and we can answer them later. Okay. But for now, Vincent and Masumi, we have a question about rehabilitation in conflict-affected and underfunded settings. So what can be done in countries, and the example given here was such as Italy, where there's limited investment in healthcare and rehabilitation services? And I'll maybe put that to Masumi. But Vincent, the question for you is, how can rehabilitation be developed in countries affected by war and instability, such as Ukraine? So Masumi, do you mind just giving some insights of how we might look at countries where rehabilitation is underfunded?
Yes, thank you so much, Samantha. Thanks for that question. So when we look at countries in conflict situation, post-conflict situation, obviously, like the factors that Vincent talked about, there's the physical aspect, physical infrastructure aspect, as well as human capital, human capacities, and the system itself being health system itself being destroyed and weakened. So of course, strengthening strengthening the system by taking a whole of government approach, as well as whole of society approach, and also to leverage and invest in community-based programs, I think would be very important. I will say that when we put together this disability and development report, you will see that despite we have issues with lack of data, disaggregated data, but oftentimes that lack of data isn't necessarily correlated with the countries' income level or development level. You will see that in some of these countries that are post-conflict affected or in post-conflict situations, they have more data than others at times, depending on the top, on the issue. So I think where there's political will and where there's appropriate policies and interventions, we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you. Vincent, I know you mentioned Ukraine in your presentation, but is there anything that you would like to add to that about how rehabilitation can be delivered in countries affected by war and instability?
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. Thank you all. Just a few words. I think there are different phases. When there is a conflict or where there is an urgent situation, we have a first phase that is humanitarian. We do what we can with everyone, and there is a lot of organizations that would usually mobilize. So the challenge there is, to respond to the urgency, the first needs, to have some coordination among the different organizations, local, international. So that means someone should take a lead, otherwise it can be chaotic. And then next to that kind of humanitarian first emergency crisis management is to build first probably a sort of a referral system. How can we identify the people who we need to be taken care of, either because of the acute situation of the crisis or for people who were already under rehabilitation services but are now no longer having the facilities because of the war and the conflict. So it's a question of building a referral system and in that system, making sure that there are skills, multidiscipline skills and support. And then there would be a third phase that would be about recovery and reconstruction and how can the system be reconstructed. I think maybe to link with the other question, when there is a crisis, there is usually a mobilization of funding and interest and commitment. And I can imagine that in Italy, where there is maybe no such priority and high visibility, funding for rehabilitation is probably not enough. If the GDP proportion of healthcare is low, then for sure people with rehabilitation need will be not seen as a priority. And it's a question of mobilizing. It's a question of also identifying good practices that can talk to politicians, that can make them feel we can do a difference and build up in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again to all of our panelists for responding to those questions, but also for your very insightful presentations. Thank you to everybody that's joined us today. Again, if you want to put a question into the chat, that's fine. Add your email to it. I think what today has again highlighted what many of us know is, you know, we need to be looking at better access to rehabilitation services. There is a great need to educate people of key stakeholders at ministry level down to service provision level and users about what the opportunities are. And we know that that is going to take a large amount of advocacy and joint working, and really the only way to achieve that is by us all pulling together and having that shared vision. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to those behind, the interpreters, the captioners, to Amy and Andrea for helping with some of the technicalities. Thank you all for joining us, but really it's about our joint vision, our shared goal to move beyond survival and build health systems that promote dignity, resilience and well-being for all. And by working together, I feel confident that we can make huge steps in that. So thanks again for this really interesting webinar. Good day.